And I would like to switch to our second panelist, which is FinTech and blockchain. And also we will talk in this area about crypto. So the first one is Mr. Haim Pinto. Haim Pinto is the CTO of Hapoalim. So while we are changing here the things, we switch to Mr. Haim Pinto. He is currently the CTO of Hapoalim, leading skills. Is from, of course, you know, Hapoalim is one of the biggest banks here in Israel. The second panelist is Ro'i Paz. Mr. Ro'i Paz, where are you? Okay. He's coming, very good. Ro'i is Information Security and Innovator at TD Bank. Ro'i, please come to the stage. And also I would like to invite, where I saw you, here is it, Professor Neil Gandal. Professor Gandal is specialized in the economics of these technologies, and he's a professor here in the, where are you? You are here. Very good, thank you very much, sir. And the last one is Mr. Ephraim Chalamish. Where are you, Ephraim? Very good. Please come to the board. Mr. Ephraim Chalamish, Dr. Ephraim Chalamish, sorry to forget you these things. Doctor. He's international professor and researchers in the media. So our focus here is on fintech and banking. And of course, how we cannot start this without talking about some crypto stuff. So the first question to our panelists here, look, we have so many people here which would like to invest in crypto. Yes, we are missing someone, but where is Amnon? Where is Amnon? Amnon? Amnon Neubach, where are you? 1 second, where is Mr. Amnon? Where? My friend. I really used to call you when we sit in the cafeteria and drink coffee. Okay, Mr. Amnon Neubach, good friend. And Amnon is the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange Chairman of Board Directory since 2014. Amnon, thank you. You're right, my mistake. We are friends, and I was assuming already, you know, I call him Amnon. Okay, perfect. Now we have the full panel. Let's start with the first question. We want to invest in cryptocurrencies. In general, we do not favor anyone specifically. There are so many today. How we can really evaluate the real values of these cryptos? You have microphones?
At least for me, I think the easiest way to evaluate a crypto, let's say there's the market value and what I believe is the real value. The first time that I see a new coin, or as I have to call them, a new shitcoin, I'm sorry to say, but there are simply too many startups, too many people who think that they have the latest innovation, the latest best, and their coin is the fastest, best, and it also simply the best. Nothing more, nothing less, the best. So the first thing is actually talk to the developers. I don't want to look at the slide and look at their presentation and how cool it looks and how they have the best and fastest JavaScript implementation of their website. I actually want to talk to the developers because the developers will be the ones who will actually push the blockchain forward. I want to see whether or not they can actually push code or they can only merge from them, I don't know, Monero's latest release or from Zcash latest release. I actually want to talk to the developers, which are almost always available on Discord, and actually sit with them to a chat. Maybe even if they're close enough, sit with them to coffee. As well, if I'm going to invest my time and money, I actually want to see that I get an ROI for it. And the developers are those who are actually going to push the product forward.
Okay, yes, Amnon.
As a matter of fact, to be honest, I don't know how to evaluate something with no value. And I'm not joking about it. I'm really serious about it. Because I think the whole idea of cryptocurrency came from the area where they try to have a ethical world with no order, with no regulation, with no any way of system, which is perfectly okay. But then it's a very big question about the valuation of this cryptocurrency. I think that as of today, I wouldn't call it currency. I would call it kind of, say, manipulation currency, which try to play all around. But to try to say that there's any way to make evaluation of it, I would say I don't know how to do it.
I would like to second that a little bit. Part of my research has been to look at cryptocurrencies and mainly looking at some of the things you mentioned. For example, price manipulation in the Bitcoin ecosystem back in 2013, and recently we've looked at pump and dump schemes that occur in cryptocurrencies. I guess most people know what pump and dump schemes are. You kind of promote something and then push the price up. We found about 5,000 such schemes in a 6-month period. Okay, so even if you could try to value it, which I don't think you cannot, and I'll come back to that in a second. With all of the manipulations that are going on, most of the markets are very, very illiquid. Most of these, they're like the penny stocks. So I would say you have to be careful because of manipulation. But then even if you could get rid of it, we've tried to come up with some determination of what leads to coins being abandoned in the market, what leads to changes, and nada. Basically, nothing explains it so far.
First of all, I want to thank you, Jacob, Gillian, the leadership of Tel Aviv University and Cyber Week for bringing here to Tel Aviv thousands of people from around the world interested in the ecosystem of cybersecurity here in Israel. It's really amazing.
Thank you to the team here, Liana. Where are you, Liana? She's in the back. Yes, thank you very much for Liana and the team here.
I think it's really amazing. And we shouldn't take anything for granted, especially when I saw the guy from Singapore who really travels the world, and I'm sure is here for a reason. Exactly. So I totally agree with Amnon and my new friend here on my right with respect to valuation. But I wanted to add something which I think is very critical. When you look at the system from the outside, let's say you're a chairman of a stock exchange, so you discuss the policy, and the policy is important, but sometimes you don't have the luxury of staying in the world of abstract. So for example, when you develop an academic concept, you have the ability to promote a policy, but at the end of the day, for example, we at Duff & Phelps, a leading valuation firm, we have to deal on a daily basis with questions of valuation of those kind of assets. I'll give you just a couple of examples. Maybe in a few years, we will not see many of these assets, but we do have them today. And people buy and sell funds with those kind of assets. And people come to us and ask the following question. When I sell the fund, or when I invest the fund, what's the value of the asset? I'll give you another example. We are very involved in many of the hacking cases of exchanges of crypto assets. People come to us and ask questions like, who hacked? What happened? Where's the money? What's the value of the asset that I lost? We have to provide concrete answers, especially if it's in the context of litigation or dispute between the parties. And when those kind of cases happen, we don't have the luxury staying at the outside. Now, the challenge, of course, is to come up with a methodology. And here, I agree with you 100%, Neil. I think at the end of the day, because this is illiquid, because it's decentralized, because it's very hard to look at similar equivalent markets like publicly listed companies, I think you have to be innovative and think about ways to value the asset.
So I'll be the last, okay? Yeah, last but not least, representing the banking industry. I think that the first thing, if you're looking to invest in cryptocurrency, you have to be smart. And when I say when you have to be smart, you need to be highly technical, and you have to know the business of trading and valuating assets down to the bit. Because this is an unregulated market, it has different rules, different types, different flavors. And in certain areas, as Neil said over here, there are a lot of illegal actions if you compare them to the actual stock exchange, like pump and dump, right? And you have no visibility to that. So understand what's a peg coin and what an asset-backed coin is and what an ICO is and what an ICO coin is. So running and buying or investing in crypto is probably not the smartest thing to do if you're not really literate in this field. And then remember that most of this market is still happening on the sidelines. Not to say anything good or bad on that. I mean, it's an evolutionary phase. I'm sitting in the inside out or outside in, depending on how you look at it. But actually, cryptocurrencies are not in the Israeli financial system as a formal investment vehicle as of yet. And there are good reasons for that. Most of them, by the way, are not technical. You know, I'm the CTO of our bank, and I'm pretty technical, not that bad. But most of the concerns are not technical. We're not looking at technical challenges, issues with the algorithms, the way that the code is written, or the smart contract, even though we have some comments on that. Most of them are revolving around regulation, staying within the legal framework, and protecting the customer.
Amnon, from a representative of a stock exchange here in Tel Aviv, what is your plan using blockchain technology into the future, and if this also going to be combined with some crypto asset also? And very similar, we would like to address the same question also back to Haim, related to what is the future of blockchain in Bank Hapoalim, the biggest bank in Israel today. So, and then of course you also can comment on your area, but I would like to address first. So, Mr. Amnon.
Okay, in this case, I have quite a better answer for the first one, which really, to be honest, we don't know how to evaluate, and especially in the stock exchange, speak about all of the cryptocurrency. Speak about, you know, the blockchain. We are in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, decided to test the water, which was about maybe 2 years ago, by collaboration between our stock exchange, Intel, and Accenture, and to build a security lending platform to try to see how we can operate as part of the system to understand what can be done with the blockchain in the future. So as we started to work on this system, we realized that many problems and difficulties and obstacles from where we started and from the point where we are now. And because it's relatively, we don't need to work very in a speed, we don't need the throughput to be so high. The guy from Intel, they talk about it, he speak very highly about it, and he's not here. As of today, we're still facing a lot of obstacles before we can introduce it to the market. We hope maybe by the beginning of 2020, we'll have something in our hands, but only for this purpose. Speaking about trading, which need many other elements, regulation, transparency, very high speed, because of the HFT, we need at least 200 markup per second for each one of the orders. So as of today, this system doesn't meet this criteria and requirement, and that's the reason why we continue to follow and to see what's going on in the market, and what we have in our hands is relatively something which is at the beginning of this step.
Okay, so a two-part question, crypto and blockchain, and we need to kind of isolate between the two. Let's start with blockchain, fairly easy. We had the same conversation last year and 2 years ago, and I'm happy to say that as we move forward, the technology matures. So yes, we'll see a blockchain deployment that makes sense on a certain use case that we already announced here in Israel, and we found blockchain as a differentiating technology for that. And we're in the midst of implementing that, and it will pass all regulatory requirements, a secure, regulated, legal framework that will deliver unprecedented value to the end users. That's in the making right now, and that's a given. If I had doubts last year or 2 years ago, it's a reality today. Having said that, it's nothing close to what people regard as the unsupervised, permissionless, open Bitcoin blockchain. One has nothing to do with the other. I'm still staking my ground saying that those type of blockchains, which are fully decentralized, will probably never hit, or will take a very long time to hit the mainstream financial system. I will not get into Libra, But that's also not a permissionless network, fully decentralized, fully democratized. Absolutely not. If you're willing to get there, we'll dive into that later on. Crypto, as we know it, as a crypto asset, no. Crypto as a pegged coin or as an asset-backed coin, somewhere in the evolution, sure, it makes sense. It's like digitizing money. It's like moving towards a cashless environment. Today, we're using not tokens, but we're digitizing money. When you need to do a P2P transfer in Israel through Bit or in the US through Venmo, you don't touch physical coins. You just press buttons and then bits go from one side of the network to the other, and voila, money just changed hands. So will we see that in the financial system somewhere in the future? I think that absolutely, but the beacons or the clues that that's going to happen will be in the legal, regulatory, international framework. The financial infrastructure that was put in place in order to make sure that we transact securely, that the global economy works in a certain pace, under certain regulations. It took us decades to build, even more than decades, right? So that has to be maintained in order to keep the stability and then the gradual migration over to the new technology.
Okay, so that was actually a nice lead-in that Haim made, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with all those concepts he raised, but you probably are familiar with the Bitcoin blockchain, which works on a proof-of-work concept, okay? Proof-of-work is this mining, wasting all this energy, okay? That's kind of passé right now. There's other ways that this can work, and one of them is called proof-of-stake. So there's proof-of-work versus proof-of-stake. Basically, proof-of-work is a bit out of vogue right now because there have been, first of all, we see it in practice, but there have been several theoretical papers in economics that show that when you deal with the type of proof-of-work thing, not only is it expensive, but it's hard to align incentives. So it harms the environment. Right, and it harms the environment, and that's very important too. That's an advantage of proof-of-stake. By the way, we're doing some research looking at the cost. Proof-of-stake doesn't necessarily cost less, but the costs do not harm the environment. And secondly, you raised another important point, which is, is it going to be a permissionless blockchain when everyone can, chaotic free entry into that? Or is it going to be a permission blockchain, which means we're going to have certain miners or certain validators? I think, like you said, we're going to move in that direction. I don't know how if the audience is quite familiar with that, but these are big changes, I think, that make sense.
Now, talking about fintech and blockchain, we were thinking in the last years, and Haim is with me already for the last 3 years almost, we were assuming blockchain will make a really dramatic revolution in the banking, but we don't see this really happening so fast. So the first question is, why? Is there some other technology underlying that you are hiding and we don't know that you are working about them, and you want here in the audience to tell us about it? Maybe there is, but...
So there are plenty of technologies that we're looking at. I think that we went through the hype cycle of blockchain and we got to the mature phase. We realized the potential, we realized what it can serve, and as I said, we do have a real implementation for that. There are other technologies right now that are fascinating. One of them is AI, right? So artificial intelligence keeps us very, very busy right now. That is a disruptive technology, the evolution of machine learning and the dawn of the thinking machines that help us sort out the data, that help us make sense of the data. So if you look at where you're putting your focus right now, sure, those type of technologies are right there, keeping us busy running and researching everything that we need to do. They have also vast implications on how your infrastructure is built and how your entire technology stack is organized. I think that as we move forward, we'll be more picky. If in the past, gravitating towards blockchain was either hype or kind of being cool oriented. Today it's much more mature. Today you're looking at the actual application. If you can solve the issue with a distributed database, great. But if you're taking a service and it forces us to take the service as we want to introduce it right now on an MVP, a minimum viable product perspective, most of the banks are moving towards an agile development framework. And you're stretching that line 5 years into the future, and you're trying to evaluate how you foresee those applications happening and how the ecosystem evolving around that service. If that actually warrants blockchain technology, we'll dive right in. If you don't see that happening, and there's an alternative technology in the sense of a distributed database as an example that I used, there's no point in just running towards blockchain just because it's blockchain.
Essentially, blockchains allow us to solve a lot of complex and really hard to solve problems without it, but we also need to think about the underlying cores of blockchain, which is essentially math, especially crypto math. RSA took plenty of years in order to be fully secure and fully mature enough to be actually implemented in the wild. As well as we, as Steady, one of the largest banks in the world, also have our own blockchain center of excellence. And with our own innovation team in Israel, we also figured what are the use cases that if we had a perfect blockchain that we could implement right now, what would be those sort of issues that it could solve the fastest and also the easiest. And what people always say, identities. How can I actually keep my identity on the blockchain that A, other people won't be able to see my private information, and B, those who actually need to see parts of my private information will be able to easily access it. For example, Israeli is a known fraudster. And the issue with regulations is that the bank can't just announce, oh, okay, he's a fraudster, so we're going to mark him as a fraudster, so we'll let all of the other banks know it. Because that's not how regulation works, that's not how privacy works, because the bank can't just announce and flag someone as a fraudster. So blockchain would actually allow to do some sort of discrete share of information. Say, well, we may have some sort of transaction from this person who may or may not align, and allow other banks to participate and say, oh, we know this identity, we don't know his name, we don't know everything about this identity, but we can get the link from this identity to the transactions and see that the transactions themselves are fraudulent and they had a lot of issues and a lot of risk involved with them, and actually create baseline for identities, whether or not someone should have a high credit score, low credit score, and everything about this person is both private as well as entirely exposed without actually disclosing anything about the said person other than his history, which is all private and zero knowledge proof and an AI on the blockchain and every other sort of buzzword in Silicon Valley.
And I think that from the very, very beginning, there was a question, is the blockchain a revolution or evolution? Is the blockchain really introduce something which is totally new and can provide us something that we don't know about it and we didn't know how to use it? Or it's a one step ahead from all of the using of the computer, telecommunication system, and the software? And as much as we know more about the services that we can get from the blockchain, I think it's more evolution, maybe one step. I don't see the real revolution behind it. Maybe it can provide better services. Maybe it can provide something that in the past we could not do as we can do, maybe as we'll do in the future, but it's not something that really changed everything. At the beginning, everybody believes so, but as much as we know more about it, we come across to the point that it's not something that really changed everything. It's maybe providing something that in the past it was hardly to do it. I'm not sure yet, but maybe it will give some. But it's, according to my mind and my understanding, it's not a really breakthrough. It's not a revolution. It's only one step ahead of this technology.
Actually, it's even interesting to think what we mean when we say blockchain. Does it mean just distributed ledger technologies? Actually, what people normally do is they lump three things together, just to see if the audience is listening. What other two things do they lump together besides distributed ledger technology? What are the other two things that people usually include when they say blockchain? That's close. I mean, that's along the, okay, so encryption, that's one, okay. And then something else? Yeah, Yeah, well, I would chaotic system. Okay, smart contracts. So those are the three things that people often, I mean, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but it's following what you're saying. So they link all these three together, but you know what? You don't necessarily need a distributed ledger in order to do encryption that you're talking about, which is important, or to run smart contracts. So there are probably many instances in which you can do it, like you were saying, a different way. And I think it's kind of humorous that when you ask people what the blockchain is, you get 100 different definitions.
It reinforces the statement around revolution or evolution, right? So smart contracts through our RPA and other technologies, you can actually automate and make a robotic process automation. You can actually automate a lot of the processes, even if you put them at the core of the banking platform or at the middle of the money stream. As I said initially, you have to separate between the technology and the business application. Business application is regulatory driven, legally binding into certain jurisdictions and aligns with the rules of global economy. Even though you have a brand spanking algorithm and a cool smart contract, if you're in violation of any of those other things, you will always live outside of the rails of the mainstream economy, and then your crypto tokens will remain crypto tokens, and they won't be able to convert into real fiat currency, real money, whatever country that you reside in. And that is the key differentiator. It's about diving into talking to entrepreneurs that have cool applications around blockchain, but will never bridge the gap into streamlining themselves into the mainstream economy and deliver value to the end user. Because if you live on an outside network and you can't make use of those tokens, then what use do you have of them? How does that deliver a value or a core value to you as a person? And I think that those elements are, for the most part, separated. There's an air gap between them. Those who bridge the gap are on the right track to introduce that technology into the mainstream.
I'll just be very brief because obviously we can talk about it forever. One of the things which I really liked about the previous panel, there was a comment about the fact that there are so many startups here and great entrepreneurs, and you wake up one day with a great idea and you move forward, and then you wake up another day, let's say after a couple of months and years, and somebody tells you, you know, there is still this great economy in the world, it's called the United States, and it's still relatively centralized, especially when it comes to the way we manage securities and disclosure and this trading, and I'm sure Amnon can tell me all about it. So when you wake up and you realize that that's the world you live in, many of your applications, going back to your point about technology in your bank, you just cannot apply, and you go back to the drawing board. What I'm trying to say is that compliance, which is usually kind of this gray area that we don't truly understand, is really a key not only for kind of fast forward a couple of months or years after you start the idea, but very early on in the process. So for example, at DAF, we do a lot of compliance analysis for entrepreneurs, new startups, or even growth companies, just to tell these amazing entrepreneurs whether these ideas actually work in real life with respect to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange or the SEC, etc. I'll just conclude with one very quick and simple example. Most of these crypto assets that my friends here refer to, the SEC over the years think about them more as securities and less as assets, currencies. And the application is huge. It means that if it's a security, it means that it's regulated. You have to disclose certain things. And for example, there are certain assets you cannot sell to what's called US investors. And if that's the reality, and you start a new business in blockchain and crypto, you don't want to exclude one of the largest economies in the world, if not the largest. Yes, maybe in a few years China will be the largest economy in the world, but I think we still want to make sure that our assets or our ideas work with the way securities are regulated in the US market, and I'm sure Amnon and his institution, they look at it very, very carefully.
Can I just add one comment? I mean, this was a great point, Ephraim. So when you think about regulation in the US, and you're right to think about it, how many regulatory agencies are there? First of all, there's the Security and Exchange Commission that you mentioned. They think of crypto stuff as a security. But then there's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. They think of it as a commodity. Okay, we're not done yet. Then there's FinCEN, which is, the sort of U.S. global crimes network. They think of it as money. And finally, the Internal Revenue Service, which is like Mas Haknasa in Israel, considers it property. Okay, if that's not enough, and by the way, these definitions make it very difficult, if not impossible, to comply. If that's not enough, we have several very aggressive U.S. states, like Massachusetts and New York, who are also involved in regulation. And if that's not enough, now we have the FTC getting in to deal with Facebook and probably their new currency. So I think your point is well taken. I don't think it's that the regulators don't want to move forward. I just think it's, it's complicated.
Now we will ask you another thing. From your perspective, as Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, major banks, academia, research, are you considering and thinking about how quantum computing is going to influence your activities and blockchain into the future?
We're thinking about it, of course.
Simple answer, but we want to understand what do you mean thinking about what you are doing.
I'll tell you what it means.
Are you sleeping well?
I'll tell you what it means. It means that when there is a convention in Jerusalem, we're going there. When the academia is talking about it, we're sitting there. When IBM is demonstrating their qubits as service, we're there to play around with it. We're looking at the programming languages. We understand and we recognize that there is a long way to go. So we can't afford sitting on the sideline saying there's something there we don't fully understand what it is. I think we have a good notion. I mean, as any bank or technical organization might have. I think that we're still a long way to go. It's not something that we'll see in production in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years and more. It's not stable enough. We understand the notion of quantum states and entanglement, and you can see that I can talk to that, and I realize that, yeah, there are issues with that, but they're not prominent issues that are burning kind of a hole in my agenda to go and swap out all of my encryption algorithms and tools. We're not there yet.
Okay. I told you that I will let you also ask the panelists questions. So currently a question from the audience, and I will go down. Okay.
Thank you. The conversation was extremely interesting, and thank you for that. Obviously, we all know that there is the news about Facebook and Libra, and just given everything you've said, what's your take? Is Facebook mad to go in this direction, or is there a sane strategy behind that approach? Can it possibly pass the regulators in the US? What's going on with that, in your opinion?
Okay. They are afraid to answer. Look, they are not answering.
Not afraid at all. They're not mad. Actually, they're very smart. And you have to appreciate the way that they approached it, very mature, taking care of business, building the Libra consortium, thinking about the business model, implementing the technology. But read the white papers. I have. Took me a couple of days. Understand what it means. The news over there is playing around with trust agents, right? So today, the banking system is your trust agent. For better or worse, takes us faster or slower, but when you want to make a financial transaction, the banks, globally, not my bank or any other bank, globally, the banking system takes care of that. It's expensive, we know it. We're trying to lower the prices, but you trust the banks. Now, you're getting a new cool technology, and your trust agents are a consortium of tech companies, for-profit organizations who are not complying with the same regulations that all of the global banks do, that are not operating under the same kind of network or legal framework that has been set in place globally to make sure that you have a safe place to live in. Now, there are plenty of considerations for plus or minus, good or bad. I'll give you one: national security. Everybody's freaking out. National security, cryptocurrency, what is he talking about? One of the strongest mechanisms that governments have in their pocket in order to secure their jurisdiction is financial sanctions. Financial sanctions. It happens in the US, it happens in Israel, it happens everywhere, right? You cannot impose that on what we foresee that Libra network to evolve into. Having a flat currency globally all around the world breaking boundaries is very romantic. I'm with you on that. It is so cool, but it doesn't align with current reality. If we'll be able to take all the legal framework and everything around it and have everybody sit together globally across the countries, then you know what? I'll satisfy with the Middle East. If we, all of us in the Middle East, can sit together and sing Kumbaya together, yay. Let's go forward with Libra. I don't see that happening. So there's so many challenges along the way, but I'll go back to what Amnon said over here. Not the revolution approach, but the evolution. Is that the right step on the right direction? Thematically, yeah, we're going towards a digital representation of our financial network or of our financial ecosystem. Is that the right implementation? Time will tell. Too early for me to even voice an opinion around that. We're just looking at it very seriously. We're analyzing everything through the eyes of our clients. What would it take to onboard the network, offboard the network, conversion rates? How do we guarantee that when you bought a Libra coin, there's real asset behind it? This is not a pegged value. This is an asset-backed coin. Who is your regulator? Right now in the association, 30% of the regulators are non-for-profit organizations. I mean, I'm all good for taking care of the weak and providing water and food for starving children in Africa. That has very little to do with running a global economy network, right? So there's still a way to go, and there are plenty more. I'll stick just to the national security element.
I would like to, by the way, I totally agree with your approach. All I would like to add is 2 points. Number one, now we're facing what is called the digital empire or digital giant that try to control the world. And here is one step ahead. They try even to produce the money, and maybe by even saying that, they try to take the monetary policies. Forget about the sanction. I'm talking about the monetary policy, which is a very important tool of all of the nation, all of the state. They, in a way, they take it from the state because they try to produce something with that maybe it's going to be a global currency all over the world without a real regulation behind it. So I don't know how to take it because it's really something very new. We don't know all of the information about it. What we do know that it's something that for the governments, for the states, it's going to be a big deal, and they're going to create a new regulation. As it's happened today in OECD, when they try to put special taxes on these digital companies, they try to put the payment according to the number of clients and not according to the income. So they understand that these global digital empires that they try to avoid all of the border, create a new challenge for the state and for the regulation. That's the reason why I'm not so optimistic about it, unless they will obey all of the regulation, and then it's another story.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing which I think is important in light of your comment and your comment on the role of digital currencies in the future governance of financial system. It can work. It can work if you plan it the right way and you execute the right way. And I'll give one concrete example. Central banks. I do a lot of work with sovereign funds, central banks around the world. They've been working, and this is a relatively recent development in the last couple of months and years, developing a digital currency which will help to execute monetary policy among central banks. And by the way, we can call from here, Bank of Israel could be a market leader, combining the Israeli cybersecurity leadership with the concept of sovereign finance central bank here in Israel. But having said that, they've been struggling so far because they wanted to be very careful, one step at a time, to make sure that once they go to market, and the same way that all central banks today in the world, they own US dollars, they own euro, some of them even own Chinese currency. In the future, many of them, all of them maybe, will own this digital currency and execute monetary policy. It has to be the right way. I have no doubt that eventually we're going to end up there from global governance perspective because the central banks want it as well. But I think this is a great example to show that the central banks are doing it in a very different way in comparison to Libra or Facebook. I just want to add by saying that our team looked at the Libra governance structure and the way they structured themselves legally, and we concluded that it's very different and it's pretty obvious than many other crypto assets, for example. The centralization process, the authority, the governance points that you referred to. So I think at the end of the day, we just, and I think the Congress, the US Congress voted with its feet, so to speak, in the sense that they tried to stop the process immediately. So I think the jury's still out.
What's interesting is that it might provide, a spur for the entrenched firms to act differently. I mean, here in Israel, it used to be, when I first came here, it cost like $3 a minute to make a phone call to the US. Okay? Fortunately, it wasn't regulation that broke this. Fortunately, it was technologies like Skype. I mean, what's going on here is, for example, this is just a brief tangent, but I went hiking last summer in Tajikistan. And it was a great hike, and I can tell people about it. But there was a nice kid who worked with our group, and he carried a lot of things, but he was a very smart guy, and I thought it would be nice if we could help him get out of this problem. So anyway, I decided to fund some internet service for him, so I had to send money to Tajikistan, okay? Tajikistan is the end of the world, and he lives in a tiny village at the end of the world. But believe it or not, an hour from where he lived, there was a Western Union office, okay? So I wired the money via sent it via Western Union, just walked to the post office and sent it. But what did I pay in terms of fees? Like 8 additional %, okay? So, if it could work, he has WhatsApp, by the way, which is sort of amazing. I have WhatsApp too. That's also amazing. If we could reduce those fees to, say 0.8% instead of 8%, which they could. So I think, getting back to what you said, I think that we don't know what will happen to Libra, but I think there's going to be downward pressure on these fees, which in some cases you could say, are monopoly fees. Western Union stock, I think, fell when Libra was announced.
So
not against Western Union.
We need to stop Professor Neil Gandal from, No, this is marvelous.
I drank some coffee before the session. Actually, I don't need it. I have caffeine in my blood. I'll shut up till the end.
How much do you swim today in the morning? How much do you swim today?
A kilometer.
1 kilometer swimming in the morning, Professor Neil Gandal.
Every day?
No.
In the afternoon, but
No, so I know Professor Neil Gandal already for so many years, and the first thing I met him, it was in a conference, and in the hotel there was outside the swimming pool. And the first thing he came in the morning so fresh, I said, how come everybody, he was swimming outside in the cold, this was winter, and he was swimming in the swimming pool outside there. So this is where, since then I remember you swimming every morning. So I would like to, first of all, to say thank you very much to this marvelous panel and move to the next panel.